Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Todd Fernandez with Climate Crisis Policy, and I'll be your host today. Thank you all so much for always coming to these meetings and for everything you're doing. I'm going to start with a little personal introduction of my own, because last night we had a 24-hour filibuster to end the filibuster outside of Senator Schumer's home in Brooklyn. I went on at 1 a.m. to talk about the Equality Act. And so I just wanted to say a sentence or two about the Equality Act and the gay rights movement. For decades, we were embroiled in all sorts of internal controversy and turmoil. For many years, we didn't want to use the word T at all, so it was gay and lesbian. We didn't believe there were Bs, bisexuals, and none of the gay men running the movement wanted to have the word T in anything. For many years, we filed a bill called the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which was only one little tiny piece of the Civil Rights Act. And we would have all sorts of fights about that bill, whether to add sexual orientation to the Civil Rights Act, whether to have a separate law just for us. And there was all sorts of high-level politics around this. Our own movement, Barney Frank, was telling us that the Black Congressional Caucus would not allow us to touch the Civil Rights Act, to ever amend it, because it could open it up to all sorts of trouble. We had a huge fight about whether sexual orientation and gender identity should be defined as a subset of sex or not. And that was pretty heartfelt and ended up all the way in the Supreme Court. And then we had lots of interaction between our major lobbying organizations, like the Human Rights Campaign and the DNC. And Andy Tobias, who's the chief finance person for the DNC, is also gay. And finally, as I was working to try to get us to file the Equality Act, it finally dawned on me that these power centers were all linked at the top. So I just mentioned this to let you know that all movements have complicated conversations. And we finally arrived at the Equality Act together after many years of deep embedded fights. And now you can't, everyone is talking about the Equality Act. And the unity that came around that bill is now proof of the fact that it's passed the House twice, and we were unable to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Bill for 17 years. We would have already passed it if Hillary had won. So I just want to lay the context as we embark on this journey of what is unity, really. To me, when I entered the climate movement a few years ago, all I could see was millions of sources of power and opportunity that weren't working together. So everything we've done since then has been geared at trying to create unity for political power. So you could get your Equality Act or your major legislation, our major legislation, to save the planet over the finish line. So with that introduction, I'm excited to say that we have great people with us today, dedicated like few others to this cause, or maybe like many others, but exceptionally dedicated. And we're going to have a conversation about this moment that is before us to achieve something historic in the American Jobs Act. And so their terminology is part of it, and then the content of what that terminology means is part of the conversation, as you've already seen. And there's clean energy standards language, and there's renewable electricity standard language, and what those include or don't include. So today is about understanding. We just want to get a baseline knowledge and make sure we're all on the same wavelength, because we all need to join this effort at some point or another. And so this is that time where we have to all push together, even if we don't completely agree on everything. And so today, hopefully we're going to find common ground in the sense that we are all in one fight together at a minimum. And so I think this is the most important aspect of our work together in the next 2 months, is building that sense of collective purpose and unity, and learning to fight together even if we disagree. And that's been the premise of climate crisis policy from the inception. And so I'm looking forward to that materializing. And I've been in all these different conversations in different spaces, and I've seen nothing but an amazing group of people with huge goodwill, dedicated to the goals. So I think by us all talking together more, we will foster that sense of camaraderie and be able to work together better. So with that introduction, I'm going to invite Mark up first, if it's okay, Jamie. Mark Jacobson. I got to talk to him the other day, and I was like, oh, I feel like I'm talking to somebody famous because I've heard his name so many times and read some of his materials. And so, Mark, welcome. Please take it away, and if you could set the stage on this conversation for us, and that would be wonderful, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much, Todd, and thanks everybody for having me on. Actually, if it's okay, can I give a little presentation for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then because I actually put something together this morning, because
sure, absolutely.
We recently just finished a new study, an updated study of the 50 states, where we developed new 50 state plans for the whole US and DC. And I want to show you some results, but also then give some history of this renewable energy movement, the 100% movement, and that'll give context to these different definitions. So just briefly, I want to just talk about, what are these plans? These are, we developed plans actually since 2009 for transitioning states and countries and cities and towns entirely to clean renewable energy. And we define clean renewable energy as non-combustion energy. We look at zero pollution and zero global warming emissions. So the technologies that we can do this with are basically wind, water, and solar. So I'll just describe those briefly. So, the motivation behind all our studies has been that there are 7 million people who die every year worldwide from air pollution, costing the world, based on statistical cost of life, about $30 trillion per year. In the US today, it's about close to 80,000 per year. And global warming is expected to cost about $25 to $30 trillion per year by 2050. And that's based on around $500 a ton of carbon. So it's still less than air pollution costs, even though it's growing, and it will surpass air pollution at some point. And fossil fuels are limited resources, and they will run out over time. Our plans have always been to electrify all energy sectors and then provide the electricity with clean renewable energy. So transportation, we go to battery electric vehicles primarily, some hydrogen fuel cell for long distance heavy transport, like long distance aircraft, long distance ships, some long distance trucks maybe, and trains. But hydrogen fuel cells won't compete with battery electrics for most transportation. Heating and cooling, mostly electric heat pumps for air heating, water heating, air conditioning, some solar hot water preheating, although that's not as competitive right now as just electric heat pumps with solar PV, some geothermal direct heats, and district heating and cooling where it's appropriate in urban areas. And then for industry, we'd use electric arc furnaces and other electric high temperature processes that are already existing. And we provide all the electricity for all these sectors with just onshore and offshore wind, solar photovoltaics on rooftops and in power plants, concentrated solar, geothermal, hydro, tidal, and wave. We have no nuclear in our plans, no biofuels or bioenergy of any type, no carbon capture, there's no geoengineering. We do, for non-energy sources, we do try to address that through policies to address permanent deforestation of biomass burning, some reforestation, eliminating nitrous oxide as much as possible from fertilizers, and also methane from digesters, from manure and rice paddies, and also landfills. And there's also chlorofluorocarbons are a big portion of non-energy emissions. So we try to address all those as well. In terms of storage, we'll need electricity, heat, cold storage, and some hydrogen storage. I'm not going to go into the details, but there are lots of electricity options, storage options. Batteries, of course, are the ones that people are looking at the most. And if they can come down in price, which they are, that's really beneficial. But there's already low cost hot and cold storage, water tank storage, everybody knows about, ice storage, underground storage in boreholes, water pits, and aquifers. These are actually really inexpensive and used in Northern Europe and in Canada quite a bit. And then we'll have hydrogen for some applications. Now, so we just finished these new roadmaps. Can we power the entire 50 United States and DC with 100% clean renewable energy for all purposes? And so we just finished a study on that. There's actually I've created an infographic map where you can click on a state and the summary of a plan will come up. The paper on this is not yet published, but these actual infographics are available. So I'm going to just summarize the results here. In 2018, the end use demand in the United States for all purposes, that's all those sectors I talked about, so it's all energy for everything, was 2.4 trillion watts or terawatts. And if we go to 2050, with projections of population and energy efficiency under business as usual, under the EIA middle scenario, that's about 2.7 terawatts. But if we electrify everything and provide the electricity with just wind, water, and solar, so there's no, again, no carbon capture, no biofuel. If you use carbon capture and coal and natural gas, these numbers are much higher. So the best benefit you're going to get is this 1.18 terawatts. If you go entirely to clean renewable electricity with wind, water, solar, you go down 57%. That's a 21.4% of that, of percentage points of that is due to the electrification of transportation, battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell. 3.4% is the electrification of industry. Heat pumps is 13.1% of all energy for all sectors. 12.4% of energy goes down because you eliminate all the energy needed to mine, transport, and refine fossil fuels and uranium. And 6.4% is end-use energy efficiency improvements beyond business as usual. Oh, sorry, I didn't update this slide. This one I haven't updated. This was for the world, so it's not exactly for the US, but I do have the numbers for the US. But anyway, this is an idea for if we did the whole world, it would be 30.5% onshore wind, 14.5% offshore wind, et cetera, et cetera. But this is how you provide that remaining energy. I wish I'd actually updated this one. I did all this morning. But let's look at the land area. So I do have the land areas for the US when we do transition everything. For the world, it would be 0.65% of all land of the world's land area for this transition. And because like there's no land for offshore wind, tidal and wave, rooftop PV doesn't require new land. We have no new hydro in our plans. There's not much new geothermal. So it's all utility PV plus CSP for what we call footprint on the ground, and then the spacing between onshore wind turbines. So that's worldwide, it's 0.65%. In the US, it's 1.07%. Now in the US, for comparison, the fossil fuel industry takes up 1.3% of all US land area. So transitioning to wind, water, and solar would reduce land requirements in the US quite a bit compared with the fossil fuel industry. And we did grid analyses, and for the whole US, we broke it into regions and looked at a bunch of individual states. And this shows results, for example, for California, where we can keep the grid stable every 30 seconds. We did a 30-second resolution for 2 years in 2050 and 2051 using a weather prediction model for all the renewable resources, and then advancing current demands for all energy to 2050. But we keep the grid stable. And this is what's important. What's the cost? What's the cost of doing all this? For the whole US, it's about $9 trillion capital costs. That's the Green New Deal, effectively, the cost of the Green New Deal for the US. And for California, it's like $500 billion. For New York, 0.4 trillion. Texas is the most expensive, be 1.5 trillion. But you can see the cost per kilowatt hour. It's actually, these costs are lower than business as usual. So I'll give you the example. If we look at the annual energy costs for the whole US, in the business as usual case, in 2050, we'd be paying $2.5 trillion per year for all energy, not just electricity, all energy. Health costs on top of that, the US, because the US has lower health damage from air pollution than most of the world. So it's still about $700 billion per year. Climate costs are about $3.6 trillion per year. So total social cost of $6.8 trillion per year in the US in 2050 for business as usual. If we replace that with wind, water, solar entirely, we eliminate the health and climate costs entirely. We reduce the energy cost by 63% because of that 57 or 8% reduction of the energy requirements, plus a reduction of cost per unit energy. So energy costs go down 63%, social costs go down 86% with entirely clean renewable energy. Just some policies. Okay, let me just jump into the policy part. So the first plan we did was a worldwide plan in 2009, and this was could we power the entire world with renewable energy, clean renewable energy by 2030? And little did we know at the time, but this would be the scientific basis for the Green New Deal policy proposals in the US. But the conclusion was, well, while it's technically and economically possible to transition by 2030, for social and political reasons, we didn't think it would happen until later, maybe 2050. So we're all proposed since at least 80% by 2030, and the rest by no later than 2050. Well, since then, there are actually 61 countries have passed laws to commit to 100% renewable electricity. And these are all listed right here. Of course, none of the largest countries in the world, but there are 61 countries that have laws to go to 100% renewables, and that is specifically renewable electricity. There are actually 11 countries that are at or above 100% renewable electricity in their annual average. Most of these are with hydro, except Scotland is now 97 to 98% renewables, mostly with wind, and Kenya is mostly geothermal, but the others are mostly hydropower. In the US, there have been 8 laws and resolutions proposed for the US to go to clean renewable energy. And these are the specific wordings from the laws. All of them have renewable energy. None of them have just clean energy. And so it started with the 2015 resolutions to go to 100% clean renewable energy by 2050. And I'm pleased to say that first resolution was actually the scientific basis in the resolution itself was our first set of 50 state roadmaps for the US. It states that based on the conclusions of our previous study that we can go to 100% clean renewable energy, that we should. But since then, so none of those laws have actually been voted on, unfortunately, or resolutions. But there are now 14 state and territory laws and executive orders to go to 100% either renewables or clean renewables, or some people use the term clean. But I'm just listening here, but in a matter of time, I'm just going to move on. There are 176 cities and counties committed to 100%, and these evolved primarily because when we first developed our energy plans for the states, we collaborated a lot with the Sierra Club. And in fact, the Sierra Club, I co-founded this nonprofit called the Solutions Project with several other people. And the Sierra Club was thinking of taking us in, but we decided to stay independent. And we collaborated with the Sierra Club, but they wanted to really go to the cities and try to transition the cities. So they actually led this movement to the cities. And as a result, with a lot of other nonprofits that have been very helpful, and I'll list some of them in a second, have actually gotten 176 cities at least to transition or to commit to 100% renewables. And so several of them are listed right here. There are also now 300 international companies, including 8 of the 10 biggest companies, committed to 100% renewables for their global operations. And some of these are listed here. There's a 100% network of nonprofits where over 100 nonprofits committed to 100% renewables. And the Solutions Project is the one that we co-founded, but some of the other ones are listed here as well. And then just to summarize, so we looked at the job creation state by state as well. Excuse me. We find we create about 4.7 million more long-term full-time jobs than lost. And that's not worldwide, that's in the US. And I summarized the footprint and the spacing. By 2050, we save 53,000 air pollution deaths per year, slow than reverse global warming. We find that we can keep the grid stable with 100%. Absolute energy costs are 63% lower, 86% lower social costs. And finally, well, the second link here is the 50 state infographic maps. So you can go there and click on a state, and up will pop a summary of the state energy plan. But the rest of these links have summaries of all the previous 100% renewable energy work. And I post a lot of stuff on Twitter if that's of interest. So with that, sorry to take up so much time, but I thought it would be useful to give you lots of information if possible. So I don't know if we're taking questions right now or what. What you
well,
prefer.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark, for setting the stage so powerfully onto this conversation. If it's okay with you, because I know you have a little bit of time, I'd like to, I was thinking I would invite Jamie Marco go ahead and talk a little bit about their work, and then we could have a little conversation after that. How's that?
Yeah, sure.
Well, thanks so much for having me on.
Is that okay?
Yeah, and I was just, excuse me.
That's like me
Well,
after.
everybody's all choked up. We're so excited. So before Jamie, you go, let me introduce you briefly. He's with Chesapeake Climate Action Network now, and they're running a whole coalition effort around this with many organizations. And there's a full court press, and there's all sorts of exciting things. So just wanted to give you a little hype. Jamie, welcome. Please take it away.
Thanks for that introduction. And it feels really great to see so many people on the Zoom call on a weekend. I know a lot of us are on Zoom calls all day, and we care enough about this to use it on our free time. And I just want to mention two things that Mark flagged. One is, he said it at the beginning, he said it briefly, 7 million people around the world die every year from just air pollutants from fossil fuels. And that is more than have died from the coronavirus so far. So we have a whole coronavirus worth of death every year. I think it's almost twice as many as have died from coronavirus every year taking place. Like, this is a pandemic of death from particulate matter from fossil fuel combustion that is happening every year. And we have the vaccine. We have clean renewable energy that we can deploy rapidly to take care of this. And that was the other piece, that we have the technology and it's actually cheaper to adopt it. So all that's left is to choose to adopt it and to require that we have these better technologies. To introduce myself quickly again, like Todd said, I work at the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. I grew up in Baltimore. I started caring about these issues in high school, and at the time there wasn't really a climate movement that I knew how to plug into. And I was just so desperate to do something. I didn't know what to do. I ended up not riding in cars for 2 years. For 2 years, I was just said, I'm not going to be part of the problem. I'm not going to ride in cars. And then I went to college. And when I was in college in Asheville, North Carolina, I got involved in the Asheville Beyond Coal campaign, which was a really incredible campaign. I was the intern. I would show up at the meetings and take notes. And like half a dozen people would meet every week, and they would plan how they were going to make the biggest machine I had ever seen, that Asheville coal plant, stop running. And I didn't think it was possible. I mean, that was an economically viable coal plant. Economics were not shutting it down. But this campaign that I was lucky enough to be a part of did shut it down. And I was floored. I was like, wow, if all of us who cared about these issues, if all the people who'd worked on that campaign had just ridden their bikes instead of organizing, that coal plant might still be operational today. So that is when I, got back in the car and started organizing. I've been going really hard ever since. I'm really proud to have worked on some of those. When Mark showed that list of places that have committed to 100%, like Washington, D.C., 2032, I worked really hard on that, as well as the Virginia one, and a little bit of other states. So things are really happening, but as I'm going to show in a moment, we have a really long way to go. So I also have a little slideshow that I want to share. So context of a clean electricity standard in Congress, and we're going to talk about clean versus renewable, I know, but when Bernie was running against Biden, and they each had their climate plans, and when Biden beat Bernie, he did something very unusual. He sat down with the candidate he just beat and said, I'm going to incorporate a lot of your policies into my platform. So there was this great conference between the sort of Bernie team and the Biden team, and they created all these policy papers, these sort of unity policy papers. And what came out of that was this commitment to 100% carbon-free electricity in the United States by 2035 that Biden ran on. He mentioned it in every debate with Trump that he had. So this was central to his climate platform, and climate was central to his campaign, and he got elected on it. And now it is our job, in my opinion, to help him pass this in Congress so that in just 14 years, you could turn your lights on anywhere in the country at any time of year and know that not a single ounce of fossil fuels are being burned to power whatever you turned your lights on for. That is just mind-blowing. I mean, Bernie Sanders, I think just 3 years ago, had a bill to have 100% by 2050. That used to be the ambition, but the ambition is gone up so much, and we really need it. Mark touched on a lot of these, but decarbonizing the electric sector is more than just the electric sector. So you can see this graph on the right. This is a breakdown of US greenhouse gas emissions. So 29% come from transportation. That's the single biggest source. 28% come from electricity, 22% from industry. That's like steel, concrete, manufacturing of all our stuff. 12% from residential and commercial. So that's, the furnace that heats your home or that heats your water boiler, and takes gas, so it's separate than electricity, and 9% for agriculture, cow burps, and all of those things. This is from the EPA. Some people dispute these numbers, but this is a sort of good sense of the picture, and it's just for the US. If we decarbonize the electric sector, like Mark talked about, heat pumps today, things that can, devices that heat and cool your house and can replace your gas furnace and your AC unit, are cheaper than the alternatives in most places in America today. And electric vehicles are already almost, if not more, affordable over the lifetime of a vehicle than internal combustion engine cars. So if we decarbonize the entire electric sector, it's not just that 28% of the electricity sector. If we electrify everything that we can electrify with technology that's currently commercially available and economically competitive, then we can reduce our entire emissions 75%. So decarbonizing the electric sector we see as really the linchpin. But as we decarbonize everything, we're going to need to generate more electricity. And so the question, I really loved, Mike, the presentation you gave at the end, or the end of your presentation, talking about all the places that are adopting 100% and how quickly this idea is catching on like wildfire. But one thing we need to ask is, like, how fast is the rate? Like, do we really need a national standard to get us there? And there's something called the narwhal curve, which I'm going to show next. So here at the bottom, you can see all sources of non-fossil fuel sources of electricity. So this even includes nuclear. If you took nuclear out, it'd be even less than this. It's about 40% today in the electric sector. And that's the graph moving along at the bottom. And you can see this graph goes up to 200%. That's because if we electrify everything we have to electrify, it's going to about double the electricity demand that we're going to need. So we need not only to get to 100%, we need to get to 200%. And so what this graph just shows really clearly is that the rate at which renewables are increasing, clean renewables are increasing. They're some of the fastest growing sources of electricity, but it's not fast enough. We need to go way, way faster. I think it's something like 5 to 7 times faster than the current rate to get to 100% by 2035. So we absolutely need this policy. And Biden has really bought in on it. His members of his cabinet talk about it regularly. It's Congress who we really need to influence. And so in a minute, I'm going to give some ways that we can all work together to urge this passes in Congress. And this is supported nationally. I mean, it's incredible because we have the technology, it's more affordable, it's life-saving, and we have the majority of the country with us. This is a poll showing that a majority of Americans, almost at a 2-to-1 margin, support 100% clean electricity, a clean electric grid by 2035. So we even have the political will. And that support is actually greatest among African Americans and Hispanic voters in America. So there's lots of support for this policy. And Congress can pass a clean electricity standard. Todd started us off on this call talking about that great filibuster to end the filibuster at Mitch McConnell's house, because the filibuster is blocking a lot of progress. A clean electricity standard or a renewable portfolio standard could pass in regular order, but it would have to be bipartisan. It would have to get 60 votes in the Senate. We would have to get 10 Republicans to vote for this. I don't think there's a single one. I mean, you could convince me that you could get 1 to vote for this, maybe 2, maybe 3, but 10, in my opinion, is just totally like absurdist reality that some people are living in, thinking you can get to 60 votes for a policy like this. And what that means is we have to pass our policy through a process called reconciliation. And to be clear, the Democrats could eliminate the filibuster without a single Republican vote. That's absolutely what they should do, because there's so many things that need to pass that can't pass through reconciliation, like the Equality Act that Todd was talking about, or the For the People Act, voting rights protection, that can't pass through the process called reconciliation, that we need to eliminate the filibuster to pass. The good news is that a clean electricity standard we can absolutely pass through reconciliation. There is some debate about that. I say absolutely, but the only person who actually knows that with 100% certainty, the decider on that, is this bureaucrat called the Senate parliamentarian. And the Senate parliamentarian decides basically what is or isn't allowed through reconciliation. But Biden, should not wait for Congress to use his existing authority also. We passed the Clean Air Act. That was huge. And the Supreme Court said that the Clean Air Act does cover fossil fuel pollution. So as we pursue a legislative avenue, the EPA can also simultaneously be drafting rules like Obama's Clean Power Plan, but on steroids, so much, much more ambitious. I think Obama's Clean Power Plan is something like 20% by 2025. I forget the numbers, but it wasn't that ambitious in terms of emission reduction. But with that same authority, the EPA could take us to 100%, and we should be pursuing that at the same time. There's a lot more to learn about this. These Evergreen and Data for Progress have partnered on voter support, polling for 100% by 2035, as well as a roadmap of how we can get there policy-wise. I'm going to stop sharing and just talk on a few more subjects. So the big question is what is included, what counts as clean or what counts as renewable. And when I advocate in Congress, I like Mark's definition. I like wind, I like solar, I like batteries and some hydro. And unfortunately, Congress is not there with us yet, so we need to keep amplifying that and asking for that. Nuclear is going to be really hard to not include in this. Things like carbon capture and storage is going to be really hard to not include in this. Remember, we have to get Manchin's vote on this, and Senator Manchin, you can argue whether he's a Democrat or a Republican, but at the end of the day, whatever policy we come up with, we're going to need his vote on it. And I've actually been the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, because West Virginia is in our region. We've been really active in trying to expand the envelope in West Virginia and give Manchin the cover to go bold on this. But there's, I think, some question about where that is going to land. I want to flag for everyone a really exciting opportunity on June 9th. We are going to have 100 faith leaders coming to DC, to the Capitol, to demonstrate for 100% by 2035. And if you are a faith leader, or if you are interested in, if you know faith leaders who you would want to send this to, I'm putting it in the chat now where you can sign up to attend. This is an in-person, it's going to be COVID safe. We're going to be masked, social distance. There'll be 100 of us, 100 in support of 100%. If you support this idea as a faith leader but can't make it in person, we would love if you would be willing to sign this letter put out by the Interfaith Power and Light. Faith letter. But a clean electricity standard as currently introduced does include a lot of these sources that we don't want to be included. And that's part of why we need to advocate for it to pass and to get stronger. But that is all I have to say for now.
All right, wonderful, Jamie. Before we just go back a little bit into some questions, can you just explain a little bit about the CES group and that coalition effort? And everyone's welcome to join that in the email that I sent out today. At the bottom, there's a link to join that effort. So Jamie, just a few words if you don't mind.
Yeah, everything you've seen today, the presentations, the polling, the events, the lobbying, is being put together by a really great coalition of folks who are meeting every week to plan this advocacy, because this policy is probably going to pass by the August recess or by the end of October at the latest. So we need to be hitting the ground running. There's no time to waste. And if you want to join that group, everyone who supports 100% clean electricity by 2035 is welcome to join that group, and we'd love to be working shoulder to shoulder.
Wonderful. I think it's geared primarily at advocacy organizations. So it would be your organization joining, I believe. All right. So as I said, I didn't get home till after 4 in the morning. And so my brain is a little dead. Maybe that's good, because I'm always a little calmer when I'm tired and I talk too fast otherwise. So let's see, I'm not even sure where to go from here, because I was reading both of the sign-on letters that we have coming out on this. And they almost sound like they're saying the same thing in a lot of respects. I mean, so let's see, maybe we should start with just, I guess, the practical question of, so different groups are drafting different mechanisms and different proposals for what this clean energy standard would look like, what the measurements are for clean or not clean, and what's included and not included. Is it okay, Jamie, for you to give just a broad, not getting to too much detail, but a small overview that gives a flavor of the approaches to draw us into this conversation so we can get it more into the nitty gritty of if and whether there are really where the distinctions are, and just so we can fully understand that.
And I might pass it off to Mark if you might be better equipped. I can also speak about what's currently before Congress. But I know
I'm talking about the proposals that the groups and the various efforts are drafting and working with Congress. So the approach for everybody to know is that everybody's in the coalition. Different groups have different thoughts about what the mechanism is or how to actually do this. And so each group is working their ideas, and they're communicating with congressional aides and working, to get them to understand everything and to figure out what their positions are going to be. And so there are a couple of variations in play here. And so this is really where the question is, like, what are those variations, and how do we know what they are so we can align ourselves and still work together, even if there are perhaps different ideas in play? Is that a fair way to set it up, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, really simply, clean renewable is, like Mark said, wind, solar, hydro, storage. Clean on its own has a much broader definition that sometimes, each of those states that pass those 100% clean standards is going to have a different definition. But in the broadest definitions, clean sometimes includes nuclear. It sometimes includes biomass. It sometimes includes fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage, which is not actually where you burn the fossil fuels and capture them before they go in the atmosphere. It's not 100% capture, and it's not actually economically viable. It's not happening anywhere, but sort of theoretically it would be allowed. And as well as some other sort of non-fossil fuel combustion sources. Is that a fair I mean, I don't want to be representing both sides here, so I just wanted.
Oh, no worries. We're just trying to get the lay of the land. Mark, why don't you go ahead and jump in and share with us a little bit. And if you could dig into the underlying issues that are being raised. So as I read both letters, it seems like the question of any fossil fuels is big, and the tenant pollutants in addition to greenhouse gases. The issue of gas, with or without carbon capture, biomass, and nuclear. And so if you could just touch on some of those and how this had maybe worked out in previous conversations at the state level, and just help us understand how this conversation usually plays out.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here, but let me just first define, so we've defined clean renewable energy as I mentioned before. And then people have been recently talking about clean energy, and then they're including, as was mentioned by Jamie, nuclear, bioenergy, could be biofuels, biomass, and biofuels for transportation, biomass for electricity, but also carbon capture. And so this kind of galls me, because when the term clean really should mean clean, whereas when you include carbon capture of any kind, or direct air capture even, that is dirty energy. It is not clean energy. And when I say dirty energy, it increases air pollution. So that is not clean. So it kind of galls me that the term clean has been hijacked just to refer to reducing CO2, which is important, but it's not the only problem, as we've discussed today. And bioenergy, of course, also increases air pollution. In fact, of those 7 million deaths per year, 4 million are indoor burning of biomass and coal for home heating and cooking in developing countries. And so, and also there's biomass burning. And so there's a lot of air pollution from biomass. So I think it's important to be accurate, at least if we're going to pass something that includes carbon capture or bioenergy, it should not be called a clean energy, because that's not clean and it's just a misleading term. Now, why is carbon, I was talking yesterday with Todd about, I guess there's a proposal for like 800 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, another one for 400 grams per kilowatt hour, which ostensibly would prevent coal from being, because coal is around 950 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. But if you add carbon capture to a coal plant, that theoretically would allow that coal plant to be included in this, and that's going to increase air pollution. There's only been one coal plant in the United States with carbon capture associated with it, and that was in the Texas Parish plant. And they built a natural gas plant just to provide the energy to run the carbon capture equipment for the coal plant. So the carbon capture equipment does not, to clarify, does not reduce any air pollution at all. It reduces only CO2 ostensibly. but because you need energy, because they had to build this gas plant, there's more air pollution from that gas plant. There's all the existing air pollution from the coal plant, plus the additional air pollution from the gas plant, plus from the mining of the gas, which requires fossil fuels right now, and from the leaked methane that results not only in methane greenhouse gas impacts, but also air pollution impacts. And so it's more air pollution, there's more mining. And we did a study that was published looking at that Texas Parish plant, and only 10% of the CO2 over a 20-year time frame would have been collected because it's so inefficient. And then what do they do with the CO2? They pipe it through a pipeline to a nearby oil field where the CO2 can then be bound with oil and to make it more or less dense so they can come to the surface faster. And that allows more burning of oil, and half the CO2 that's sent there is actually released back to the atmosphere. And there's no proof that any of the CO2 is actually sequestered under the ground. So we have no proof whatsoever that the carbon capture actually reduces carbon. We know it increases air pollution, increases mining. The whole thing is a scam. And it's a really serious issue that if we're allowing this to be included, all this money is going to be diverted to this carbon capture. Same thing with direct air capture. It's the same thing. That will result in little climate action actually being taken, little impact, more air pollution, more mining, and just, I would strongly recommend even allowing anything related to carbon capture in any bill.
Yeah, I agree completely that carbon capture is a total scam. I mean, it's sort of wishful magic wand thinking. I disagree that including it would mean we wouldn't take action. I mean, right now, wind, solar, and batteries, new wind, solar, and batteries is cost competitive with new gas in most places in the country, if not a little bit cheaper. And so if you took gas plus an additional cost for carbon capture, it's going to be way more expensive than renewables. So if utilities have to get to 100% by 2035, we're going to have a mass shift to wind, solar, and batteries. Utilities aren't going to say we're going to go with the more expensive option to meet that goal, in my opinion. And I mean, maybe by 2050, carbon capture, like there could be major breakthroughs, it could be much cheaper, which we could say is bad or good. But by 2035, there's no wind and solar are still dropping. I just don't think there's any way that carbon capture is going to be cost competitive.
So that's
I agree with that it won't, in reality, you won't have much growth of it. But what you do have is a huge amount of government funds diverted towards it. And then you'll have lots of policies at the state level that are saying, oh, look, the federal government supports this and they'll push for it. This will just extend the fossil fuel industry, I can guarantee you. I know it's a trade-off here between trying to get something passed and actually having something effective. But I think everybody should at least be on the same page, at least state exactly what's going on and be accurate about it in their policies and recognize that there is a problem with carbon capture. I mean, it increases air pollution, and it doesn't matter. The thing is, it's intrinsic in the technology, so you can never. Carbon capture is not designed to reduce air pollution. So even 2050, it'll never reduce air pollution. So it's not even. They're not even trying. I mean, it's not. So I think we need to be at least clear about the impacts of these different technologies if they are implemented. Even if you want to include them, that's the potential impacts and downfalls, the damage. I mean, because people assume it's 90% capture rate. First of all, it's not 90%, it's closer to like 55%. And then what do they do with it? Whether it's actually captured in the end, it depends on what they actually do with the CO2. So, right. But it's the same thing with bioenergy. I mean, you're still burning it, creating air pollution. It's not clean.
Mm-hmm. So wonderful. All right. So how has this been addressed? On 28 states have renewable electricity and 7 have clean electricity. So in the legislative battles that you've seen at the state level, how did they navigate this? And are there any states where it would have normally appeared politically problematic that for whatever reasons, whether they have industries or et cetera, that were impacted, where they were able to work through these issues and come to a resolution?
Well, let me just comment, so California and New York, I mean, they do not have any wording that allows carbon capture or even bioenergy. I mean, California, the law is to go for eligible renewables to be 60% eligible renewables by 2045. But the only reason they have that, not 100% was because hydro is not included as an eligible renewable. So the remaining 40% can be hydro or the eligible renewables, but it has to be clean, renewable, and zero emissions. So they actually have the term clean, renewable, and zero emissions, not or. There's no or in there, it's an and. So California is a 100% clean, renewable energy, for electricity in this case. And New York is similar. They have like a, they call it a clean energy standard, but what do they do? If you look in the words, it was like 70% renewable energy, then 23% energy efficiency. And nowhere in there do they mention nuclear, although I think they assume that there's existing nuclear might be around in 2050, 2040 in that case. But there's nowhere mentioned carbon capture or anything else. They just assume that the rest will probably be renewables or energy efficiency improvements. And Washington State is also, if you look at the details of the Washington State law, it's called, I think they use the term clean, but it says right in the text, it says the only new energy can be renewable, the only new electricity can be renewable electricity. Utilities may only procure renewable electricity. So Washington State has clean, and that's Jay Inslee's law, and there is nothing in there that allows carbon capture or anything that's not renewable. It might allow biomass because they call that renewable, but
wonderful. This is all extremely valuable information. Can you just touch on the ultimate third rail in this whole world, nuclear, a little bit more? Because I'm being told, I forget which group, which meeting I heard it in anymore, so the timelines of 2030 and 2035, so there's the practical cost and then the reality that nothing's in the pipeline and et cetera. So how big a Achilles heel is this conversation?
Yeah, well, so there's 2 nuclear reactors being constructed down in Georgia, and they've been delayed again. So, they may be finished by next year, or they may not. But that would have been 16 to 17 years if they're finished next year between planning and operation. There's nothing in the pipeline. So say even in 15 years, this is 2021, the next nuclear reactor for his plan today would be 2036. But there's nothing even being planned. It costs 5 times more per kilowatt hour than new onshore wind and utility solar. It takes 15 years longer. I mean, you can put up solar rooftop in half a year right now. Utility scale, maybe 1 to 2 or 3 years at the most. So in terms of time, it's not competing in terms of the time, nor in terms of the cost, and it still has all the other side effects like meltdown, weapons proliferation, radioactive waste, mining, etc. Now, in terms of small modular reactors, well, so there's an issue. The only issue really is whether to keep existing nuclear versus new nuclear. Hardly anybody thinks there's going to be new large-scale nuclear reactors in the U.S. Existing reactors, they're trying to extend them now. I think people are pushing this new tax credit for nuclear reactors to keep them open. We did an analysis for the 3 upstate New York reactors and found that the $7.8 billion subsidy to keep them open, which over 12 years, if you took that money, you could have replaced those reactors right away with clean renewable energy in New York. And in 12 years, you're going to have to spend another $7 to $8 billion for renewable energy. So you're basically spending twice as much for the same energy with these nuclear subsidies. So subsidies, people are pushing for them, but I would hope we push back because they're just a waste of money. You can take those subsidies and get more renewable energy, in fact, and replace the energy for the nuclear and with basically half the cost. Now, in terms of new nuclear, they're researching small modular reactors, but even those, they're not even estimated to be ready till 2030. But they're also the same cost. They're estimated to be the same cost as large reactors. In fact, more, because small modular reactors were built starting in the 1950s. However, it was because they were too expensive that they went to large ones, to the economies of scale. So the bottom line is that there is this push for funding. This is kind of the thing that I'm concerned about. There's all this money in the DOE and going to researching small modular reactors, carbon capture, bioenergy, all these things that we know are not going to help. And that's why I think it's a distraction, and we really want to focus on things that we know work, we can put up quickly, and that their costs are declining and low.
So
Yeah,
this-
I think Mark summarized it really well. Yeah, and requiring 100% clean electricity, what it would mean is if you retired a coal plant, it doesn't require that nuclear stay open, but if you retire a nuclear plant, you need to replace it with renewables, and not only replace it, but keep pace to get to 100%. And I actually have to jump at 1 o'clock, and before I go, I want to put in the chat a way for people to contact their senators. And so this is going to be a link to like email your senator, let them know what you think. And if you want certain things included or not included, please put that in, because now is the time when we need to be telling our legislators, you know, it's great for us to talk amongst ourselves and say carbon capture, we don't want it, nuclear, we don't want it. But what's most important is that we tell our senators. So I'm going to put this link.
Wonderful. And we have a whole adopted district program that we're going to be talking about a little bit more, where we engage our elected officials in a systematic way, building local coalitions at the grassroots level to have much bigger power than if we just individually send an email. We need to build real power at the congressional level. And that means building your local coalitions, as you all are doing. Well, I just want to say before you have to go, because I know Mark has to go too at 1, that this is wonderful. I'm a little bit older now, I feel. I've heard a lot of arguments about a lot of things in my life. And I'm hearing a lot of common ground here. I'm hearing a lot of common ground. And that's what I've noticed in the movement, that there's much more common ground than there are differences. The differences, even here, I don't want to get into characterizing it, but we're a little bit verklempt about some things that don't sound economically viable or possible. But we do need to get clarity about what the position is that we're advocating for. So we need the organizations that are in these internal discussions, I hope, to be able to share, this is our definition. Is it 0.8? Is it 0.4? We didn't get a chance to talk about gas. And I hear everybody on all the calls agreeing about gas to be excluded, but we also know the Clean Futures Act has this 800 threshold versus 400. We didn't really get to talk about that. And we didn't talk yet about the modeling of what, really what is the language and what are the policies that people are pushing for? How do they work? What are the mechanisms, penalties, incentives, all this kind of thing that are very much in critical pieces of the puzzle. Because we can agree on these big stroke issues here that we just discussed, but how you craft the policy to achieve these goals it matters. And this is a $1 trillion question for the future of this planet that we need to get the answer right. So we're looking forward to that next stage of conversation. It's happening behind the scenes, and I'm eager for it to happen a little bit more with all of you, because I know you are experts. You don't follow, you wait until you agree and you understand, and then you act. And that's how we operate, of course, with our climate bill package and everything. So here we are at this moment where this most important question is on the table and in play. And so we all need to know what our position is so that we can then get in this fight in earnest. I really don't see huge discrepancies. And I know that the politics, we didn't have a conversation about the politics really, but I see more common ground than difference. And I am coming from a gay rights movement where all we did was infight and eat each other alive. I hope that my experience in that field will encourage everyone here to breathe when you feel excited or angry or passionate. Think about the children, put the collective ahead of our individual, and let's go all in to win this victory. We have a huge opportunity to change history together. So with that, I think I'm just going to thank our guests, and I'm going to invite you both back. Any closing thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, I'll just say I appreciate everybody staying on listening, and yeah, it's great that you're all so passionate about this, and I know we can all solve this together. So let's do it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Mark, I'd love to have you come to the maybe CS policy group conversations or join that effort. We'll see. I don't want to start.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it again.
And Jamie, any last thoughts?
It's time to take action.
And Jamie, say it again, the 100-week thing, the 100.
So we are going to, on June 9th, we're going to have 100 faith leaders in support of 100% on the Capitol and cheering and pushing Congress to act. And then what we're going to do is every week after that, we're going to have another 100 people for 100% coming to the Capitol and supporting this policy. And they're going to from a different constituency every time. So small businesses, West Virginians, moms, everybody supports 100%. And so that's what we're going to try and show to the members of Congress.
And I'm talking to Corinna Gore this Wednesday, and I'm going to ask for her help getting faith leaders there. And our faith team is going to support that. And Jamie's coming to talk to the faith team folks on Monday. If you're here, FYI, I haven't had a chance to let you know. So we're going to help, rally the folks that need to show up for this thing and see how big we can make it. Everything we do now is action on top of action. Say yes to everything and then double it. That's what we're in crunch time. So it couldn't be more exciting. I've done lots of marches on DC. We've done lots of direct actions. It's time to flex those muscles and get the exercise that holding signs up in the air does, exactly. We're going to march for a purpose instead of around the block screaming at buildings. We're going to start directing our energies to Congress. There are 435 people and then 100 who decide the fate of our humanity right now. And they have that in their hands. This is an unprecedented moment. So, all right, Jamie, I know you got to bounce. I'm so glad to be with you all. Mark, thank you. Your work is the foundation for so much, as you people really appreciate that. And I don't know, I'm feeling good about the sense of camaraderie and collective purpose. So I'm excited to see and feel that.
Thanks,
Thank you.
all.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Well, that was fun, huh? Let's see. All right. What time is it? 1 o'clock. All right. We're going to have time to talk today. That's my plan. I planned it. Of course, I didn't think that was going to go for a whole hour. So I just need to jump through a few other business items with you. Let's see. Where else is on the I feel like I need to meditate for a few minutes before I start talking again. But we don't have that opportunity. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Earth Bill and our collective effort on that. And just want to say a few words about the Earth Bill again, because I'm getting questions from various points. First of all, it's going quite well, I think. I put the list of groups and activists who are supporting it. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who lead. Leadership is very difficult. It's the people who get out in front. And, so all of you have already done that. I want to thank you personally, because this is not easy what we're doing again. And I did this for the Equality Act, and I swore I would never do it again. And here I am on the other end of the receiving of these, like waiting for the next one and waiting for the next one and waiting for the next one. Having faith, but also always worrying. So anyway, it means a lot for everyone who has stepped up. The Earth Bill is really an attempt at unity, building unity across those three big sectors, a collective, understandable demand that everyone can understand that really derives from what you just saw Mark Jacobson put up about the sources of the pollution and the key solutions that we all know. So there's really nothing new or exciting about it, frankly, except maybe the capture of big ag and a definition of putting the responsibility for regenerative agriculture on them. And that's actually a pretty clever little maneuver, if I say so myself, but it really squares the political focus of the Earth Bill on the major corporations that are controlling the policy that create the pollution. So it has that advantage of being a political focused solution. It's the environmental problems. It says my internet is unstable, even though we're plugged in. And so, the website is pretty much done. We're going to be adding all the logos and all the names and another set of asks. And but thank you to Cece and Dylan for bringing that so far along. I could show you real quick. Let me do that. Here it is over here somewhere. Here's the Earth Bill, the details. a quick little blurb that explains how critical it is and what Biden's doing and the next move. Then the pledges, materials, more action you can take, ready to go all in. This has been added today. Call your senator, join the network. There's more action steps. Get informed has all the material that you've seen before about the nutshell, why it's needed, the carbon clock and the timing issues, etc. Join the network has all the information about our meetings and the context of this network, all the meetings here, full meeting schedule calendar, which so for everyone who's on different calls and can't remember where and when, well, you'll be able to go to this website, click on that full meetings calendar, and it'll have the links and information for all of our monthly meetings and weekly meetings, adopted district, it's all here, our agreements and actions. And at the bottom, or maybe at the top, all the names of everyone and all the groups are going to be listed. And then there'll be one more page for memes and that sort of thing. Let me just go back to my agenda. So I wanted to have a Q&A about the Equality Act, but I'm a little bit worried about time. So I'm just going to finish. I don't have a lot more announcements, and then we'll have that Q&A because I want to be able to get into that. And I just want to say that the push for a clean or renewable electricity standard fits right in, right? That's our top line demand. So the way you pitch this to your Congress folks is you say, we have the Earth Bill, it covers this. We need your support because we're trying to create a demand for the outside movement to build political power from the outside, which will then reinforce and support everything you're doing on the inside. We need this leadership from the organizations to support the grassroots demands. And I think we do legitimately have a collectively created grassroots demand. But again, it's all built on their ideas. So it's really about the packaging and the brand. And that's critical to being able to talk about something. You're not going to get people excited about a clean electricity standard in the public sphere, or rallying as much. We need something that gets people excited. That's the purpose of that. I'm getting questions like, well, who else has signed on? That gets back to the leadership question. If you like the ideas and you believe in the message, I hope that's enough for you, in your organizations. And but there will be more groups. And if you're one of those groups that are working on your endorsement, please speed that along because other people are waiting for your leadership and will depend upon it. That's just the way it works. There's questions about some folks don't like electric vehicles because of batteries. And some folks would prefer and evidently there's a question as to whether, some minority communities use vehicles more than they use the bus. And so why not buses? And the pollution asthma problem is of course directly related to car exhaust fumes. There are lots of answers to these kinds of questions. But ultimately, it's going to depend on your own group's willingness to, realize that there's a lot of good in this, even if it doesn't fit every perfect issue or concern that you have. And this is what I mentioned before. We did not want to include transgender people in our legislation. We did not. The straight community had taught us that we were gay and sissies, so we hated that part of ourselves. And we were not going to even admit that they existed or that they should be included. And people would say, well, we'll come back for them. And I would always stand up against that fight. And I stopped some of our federal legislation over that issue. So I get what it feels like to feel passionate about something and principled. So I just want to encourage everyone to put the planet above our own individual concerns and to think big picture and realize that none of this is mutually exclusive. The Earth Bill is one vehicle. It fills the gap by articulating the mandates. It's bolstering everything that's being done right now in the CES push. Will be perceived to be a little bit to the left of some of that, and you can never counterbalance enough, particularly with the opposition coming in full steam right now. So that's my pitch on it, and I'll be open, of course, to hear your thoughts. So just the last things, running off Earth Core Mondays. We're meeting every Monday night at 8 o'clock. These are the action meetings. We have a focus on Congress. I'm going to open this again real quick just to show you. Share this. Art has put together a target list of Congress people from various letters I've sent out to you that you've seen about the debate over this topic. So here you can see different senators and representatives that are reflected in those articles. So they're obviously in a position somewhere to have authority and a say in the matter. We'll be adding who's adopted the district and their congressional districts there. These are going to be our targets. Here's the committee members for two key committees, House Climate Crisis Select Committee and the Energy and Commerce Committee. So the group will be working on Congress and we'll be working on outreach and Monday meetings. We'll be targeting those. We'll be looking for organizations that fall within those things. One other thing I want to show you that we've pulled up, particularly this one. This is Art, our legislative liaison, is doing some great due diligence and background research. But this shows you where Paul Tonko gets his money. And here you can see oil and gas is 43,000, miscellaneous energy 72, electric utilities 138,000. If you click on any one of these, it will take you to the details on this. Specific companies: American Gas Association, Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas, Association of Convenience Stores, you get the idea. Natural fuel gas, propane gas, gasoline marketers, gaslight companies. If you go back to this and you look at, I'm sorry, I went too far. Energy and natural resources, back to that. You can see he gets quite a bit of money from here. Let's look at electric utilities, 138,000. Here they are: AES Corp, Alliant Energy, American Public Power Association. So you can see from these lists that the opposition knows exactly who the target is. They know exactly, and this is how they play with money. We don't have money, although our movement has a lot of money. If they, hopefully they're in this game. The gay rights movement bought its way into political credibility by funding candidates. We had to because everybody hated us. So there's nothing, this is the game as we know. But this begs the question then, who else funds? Because these are just the corporate funds, and there are individual donors, of course, for all of these. And Art's looking into that. But so I'm bringing this up for you to all think about this in your congressional district organizing. It's time to go deeper than just phone calls and emails. Those letters were the opening salvo. Hello, we're here. We're about to make a lot of trouble if you don't support the right outcome because our planet's at stake. So this means figuring out who their major donors are, who ran their campaign, find out the full lead staff for their campaign apparatus. These people will be much more accessible now because they're not in campaign mode. But these are the people with influence, and find out who the individuals were. So you have to start researching and going very deep if you really want to have sway in this affair. So let's see. That's what we're going to be talking about a lot in those meetings. We're going to go deep, obviously. We're not fooling around. I've just been talking about the surface and getting us sort of coordinated. We're just beginning what's going to happen next. As you know, the direct action teams will be meeting. They're keep July 2nd for Pollution Independence Day. And we're still looking for additional marketing help and outreach. There's a link to submit groups, but we have a lot of groups and a lot of emails already. So Michelle Brandt's going to be overseeing that a little bit. Michelle, can you say hi for a minute? There she is.
Hello. Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be working with anyone who wants to take this on. And this was a great session, Todd. Thanks for organizing. I learned a lot. And the more we can keep educating everyone is really important. And I keep seizing on that word that you use, unity. So I'm hoping through our outreach efforts to keep building on that, and excited for anyone can join and to brainstorm about how we prioritize and take this forward as effectively as possible and bring everyone together. So thanks, looking forward.
Thank you, Michelle. Michelle comes from a background of international constitutional making. So she's dealt with a wide array of stakeholders with very complex. She wrote the book on the process for how to make a good constitution. And so we are in good hands.
And the priority on that is grassroots. and finding common ground, even among people who want to kill each other. So, and they do. So I think that this outreach and unity and building this grassroots movement for these clean energy standards is just critical. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's a wonderful group of you already who volunteered to be on the outreach team. And I looked at the list and I was like, all right, this is a serious group of players. So that's exciting. Same with the congressional team, and we'll be, focused on all that outreach. And of course, through your adopted district efforts, we want everyone who's adopted district to get on board with this. The link, I'm going to just put it in the chat. Nothing is more important than organizing in your congressional district. Literally nothing is more important. If we didn't already have it, I'm organizing in mine, but there's a team already organizing it, thank goodness. I'm just starting to go deeper and find key players. Groups have taken the pledge, are in my district. Espaillat, I'm setting up meetings with them. It's where I'm going deeper because I'm planning to figure out where all those levers are and myself. And I'll be walking through that with you in these meetings and explain to you exactly what I'm doing step by step to help guide that idea. Where's the chat? I just want to put the sign up for adopted district in the chat. And if you haven't done it yet, and don't worry, you don't have to stay on there forever. It can just be temporary. We need to fill this out. We have, oh, Greg, do you know how many we have? Is there an update?
Yeah, sorry, I've been doing other things. I haven't had a chance to make an update yet.
I can't believe that, Greg. I'm shocked and disappointed. Greg is working so hard all the time. We finally cleared up our MailChimp list and joined into one account. We're paying out those big bucks, about $60 a month, just to have a list that we can manage without going crazy. So nothing's more important than adopting your district. And, I know people are attached to the bill package, and there's new bills in the bill package that finally got filed. We haven't added them to the package because we still wanted to get your sign off, but you've already voted on these in polls before. It's the Justice for Black Farmers Act and the American Jobs and Energy and Manufacturing Act, which is Senator Manchin's bill, basically tax credits and incentives to put new energy facilities and projects in old fossil fuel arenas. So those two bills, I think there's enough consensus on them to just put them in the package, and we're just waiting for some of the more spicy bills to get filed. And it's like, well, how much longer are we going to wait? I think some of the folks are trying to get their ideas into the American Jobs Act. So, for example, the tax subsidy bill or the international exports of fossil fuels. I don't know if that's going to make it in, but all the subsidy stuff should make it in. So that might be some of the holdup. But the bill package, was always training wheels, and we're going to run over 1:30 for people who want to talk. So don't worry, I'll just stay here as long as you want to talk about it. What was I saying? Oh, the the climate bill package was always a set of training wheels to teach us to work collaboratively across topics. And that bill package is still your best tool at the grassroots level to find compatriots who care about these individual issues passionately and say, we're going to be fighting together. The leadership determines which bills are going to see the light of day. So we're not in the steering position on any of that, and neither are the lead sponsors of those bills. So just keep everything in context. When you're in a legislative journey, you have to lead and you have to follow. And right now we're doing both. We're leading with the Earth Bill and the bill package, and we're following the administration's push and through this little tight idea of budget reconciliation, which is self-constraining and is not the end of the story for the year or this Congress, but it's the fight at hand. And so the reason we tried to build our infrastructure in advance is so that when the move started to happen, we would be ready. And that's why I kept pushing. Don't worry about so much the meetings, build your infrastructure, get your team together. For 6 months, we've done a pretty decent job, I think. But now we have to pivot and we have to focus on the fight at hand and the win that's possible. So I know how it feels to be attached to a set of bills or a process that's in motion that you feel you signed up for. Agility in the legislative journey is paramount. I was attached to the Off Fossil Fuels Act. I was spent a year and a half of my life every day to get it to where it was, and then they didn't refile it, and I was devastated. So I know how it is to have to let go of certain things to move forward for the collective purpose. So I'm urging you to make that pivot and to look at the email that is in everywhere, and that to your Congress people that set this context right. And I believe it still mentions the Earth Bill package. And I'm also talking to Senator Booker's office next week about this. And I mentioned I'm speaking with Corinna Gore about how to bring the faith community more actively, aggressively to the moment that's at hand. And you heard the CES group led by Chesapeake Climate Action Network is starting off with their weekly actions at the Capitol with 100 faith leaders. So I think that's everything on the list. Oh, at the bottom, you see you can join the coalitions. The CES group is, it's got Sierra Club and NRDC, and they're all there. And like I say, some of them have different proposals, which is very interesting, a space to be in. The U.S. Climate Action Network is also entering this conversation. I put both sign-on letters for the Renewable Energy Standard and the Clean Energy Standard from the respective parties, Friends of the Earth and Food and Water Watch and a whole bunch of other folks are pushing this letter of the Renewable Energy Standard to exclude specifically these other elements. That's in line with, of course, the Earth Bill, which does this. And I don't think anybody's upset about the fact that people are pushing for slightly different ideas, or so just go for it and do it in a spirit of solidarity. And if you just fight for what you believe in, and don't worry too much about criticizing others in the space. So that's it. For that, I'll stop now and let's just take stack if you want to put your name in the stack. And I can't thank you all enough. I'm exhausted, but energized. I can't believe it. The spirit's back in me. I'm ready for it. We're going down now. And I honestly don't feel that there's such huge space between the various perspectives. And the more I hear them talk, the more I think that. So we're going from like this perception of conflict into a reality of humanity and, opportunity. And so I think it's wonderful. We do need to tweak some issues with our definitions, perhaps. I think maybe we need to say, we already say existing hydro, maybe add existing nuclear. I don't know if that's a third rail to say that, but at least, because we're getting pressure from the anti-nuclear, some folks in that camp saying, by leaving the word out, we're consenting to its inclusion. And I don't agree with that analysis, but I understand the point. And we've solved that problem on the hydro by saying existing. We're also working on the electric vehicle front. Bob Yunke from Climate Action, Elders Climate Action, and USCAN is a leader on that topic. And he's got some additional ideas for basically increasing the tax on fossil fuel vehicles, which they do in another country. So anyway, we'll talk more about all of that in those policy sector groups. And we'll move forward on that. We added a livestock provision to the agricultural definition, which is very exciting. And I did something that I shouldn't probably admit. I have this vision of cameras on all the facilities that raise, quote, livestock, that, when you go to the grocery store and the meat package is there, there's a QR code and you put your phone on it and it pops up and you can see live stream videos from where they're being, living, how they're transported, how they're slaughtered, etc., so that we can actually see how the animals are being treated and our food is being, people's food is being created. And I think that will help a lot, a little transparency. They actually shoot and kill people who go in and film these things. So I know we're onto something. If they want to stop you that badly, that it's a little transparency here could go a long way. All right. So with all of that, I just want to say thank you again. We're dwindled down. I know people are tired of hearing me talk. So put your name in stack and let's go. Go ahead, Greg.